For this video, what I want to do is something a bit different. I would like to discuss the recent history of the DFL. And to start with, I would like to talk about the most significant development in the party's history. In 2022, Minnesota elected its first DFL trifecta in a decade. One was elected in 2012 and another in 2022. And one thing you're going to find is that if you expect Minnesota politics to follow conventional wisdom, then you don't know Minnesota politics. A lot of things were accomplished, and here is a quick summary of them. It's just a long list of everything any Democrat in America could hope for, dream of. It all happened in 2023 when the legislature that was elected convened. And this happened because of furries. Furries helped make this. Furries have not been taking enough credit for it either. And the local group, MN Furs, I've been somewhat critical of them, that they haven't been involved enough in the happenings of St. Paul, even though clearly there is an ear for them. This list doesn't even include Minnesota's first-in-the-nation trans refuge law, or protecting a woman's right to bodily autonomy. That's just shoved in this children and families category. This is the stuff that happened after 2020. And if politics worked like it did in the 20th century, the DFL wouldn't have gotten a majority. It would have been completely slaughtered, to be honest with you. But that century is over. We're in a new century, and more than half of America is a lot smarter than that now. So let's start before COVID, during Trump's first and only presidential term. During the blue wave of 2018. And that nearly didn't reach Minnesota because the front runner at the time was Lori Swanson. Now, Lori Swanson isn't governor now, and she never will be governor, thankfully. But, yeah, she was the moderate. She was to the right of Governor Tim Walz on many issues, including the issue of legalizing cannabis products. And because of this article, this one scandal that happened right before the primary, she lost. While this map doesn't make it look obvious, she lost so bad that she went from being the front runner to third place. And this is why independent journalism is important. This is why trustworthy journalism in general is important. So, on this map, we have Minnesota counties. The ones in green are the ones that Lori Swanson won, and there was obviously some strategic voting going on around here, because these are also mostly Republican counties, and Lori Swanson was a weak, bad candidate. And they're also sparsely populated. The blue counties are the ones that Governor Tim Walz won, and you'll notice that the shading goes from dark. Walz was and continues to be very popular in southern Minnesota. This was his congressional district, after all. But here is where the vote goes from being in favor of Walz to the second place winner, Aaron Murphy. Here's a poorly drawn Hennepin County. No, wait. I mean, the lines are smoother. And this over here is Ramsey County. She won Ramsey County, which is where the state capital, St. Paul, is, and also Cook County, which is weed, stoner, everything, and completely shut down during COVID. But COVID hasn't happened yet. Lori Swanson lost this because of this one Intercept article. And it was widely shared. And I was one of the furries that shared it. Before she got a chance to lose the general, she lost the primary to Tim Walz. Because it was a wave year. Going all the way back up here, this is before 2020, this is before COVID and the murder of George Floyd. He also won some of these rural-ish counties and parts of southern Minnesota. He won the parts of this part of the state here that determines statewide elections. Never mind any of this part. Everything north of this line is well, these are also solid. This is where Duluth is. But everything down here is what tends to swing the most. Walz won that in 2018 and got a divided legislature. In 2018, the state Senate had one election. Had this gone to the DFL, then there would have been a trifecta. The work would have been done, but that didn't happen in 2018. And then there was the House of Representatives election. And in this election, the DFL won 18 seats, giving them a majority of 75 to 59. All of this was done because of judicial redistricting, because the House and Senate couldn't agree on a map, so the Minnesota Supreme Court stepped in and made the fairest one they could possibly make. Prior to 2020, the map skewed slightly in favor of Republicans for both chambers, if you can believe that. But 2018 was a wave year, so it could and did surmount some of that unfairness. Quite a bit of it, actually. Another thing I should also mention is Lori Swanson was Minnesota's Attorney General, and again, very moderate. Nothing like Keith Ellison now. He is very much progressive on basically everything. Keith Ellison was elected to Congress to represent Minnesota's 5th District in 2006. And he started to be the first Muslim ever elected in Congress in 2007. So, about 5 years after 9/11, Minnesota was like, yeah, let's elect a Muslim man, the first one, in fact. And so we did. I'm going to put this in dark mode so you can see it better. But this was the composition that the State House and Senate had from 2019 to COVID, to the worst year in anyone's lives that is currently alive. If there's any boomer that says we had it worse, they're lying. You know they're lying, so call them a liar about that. Minnesota's DFL had a slim majority in the state House, and the Republicans had a slim majority in the state Senate. And this is the legislature that propped up Minnesota's economy during that time. People seem to forget that there was a lot of chaos and governments were scrambling across the country, across the political spectrum, at the state level, to try and defeat the pandemic as much as possible. And as the pandemic was happening, the governor overrode the legislature, used his constitutional emergency powers, and enacted mandates. And furry migration in 2020 was probably possible, but there was a snag in planning, so they canceled the whole convention. Furry migration, of course, being the MN Fur's official furry convention, which is a rather unique way to have a convention happen, to have your official local furry group run it. That's not usually how it works. Usually the convention has its own self-governing body independent of the local furry group, but here, MN Furs runs furry migration, and it is a great furry convention. I really, really, really love their theme, Lost in Time, for 2024. But before we get to that, let's get lost in time again. "2019, divided legislature. 2021, divided legislature. Then came the 2022 election for the 93rd legislature in 2023. Everyone was expecting a massive red wave, a bloodbath against Democrats across the country, including Minnesota's affiliate, the Democratic Farm and Labor Party, the DFL. And it turned out to be a massive disappointment. The Democrats held the Senate, and Republicans only had a few seats of a majority in the House. That they're going to lose this. The Republicans are going to lose their grip on this. The Senate is an open question. So we had like the upside down of Minnesota. In Minnesota, Republicans had a slim majority in the Senate, and the DFL had a majority in the House. The DFL lost some seats after COVID, but after COVID and all that in 2020, but they kept control of this, and were seeking to gain control of this. And going into the 2022 midterms, the current incumbent governor, Timothy James Walz, was actually expected to win another term. But no one was expecting this. During the 2022 midterms, the DFL, for the first time since 2012, got a legislative trifecta. The governor, the state house, and the state senate, with a one-vote majority. So 1 vote Republican majority to 1 vote DFL majority, did a lot of stuff. And I mean a lot of stuff. Minnesota went from being the center of global attention for the murder of George Floyd and the righteous anger that followed, to getting a lot of positive attention across the country, with congratulations from Obama for doing all of this. These are all of the accomplishments that happened, including the legalization of marijuana. And it's all because this guy couldn't keep his mouth shut about furries. And his many other blunders along the campaign trail. 2022 was also the year that the Supreme Court decided to overturn Roe v. Wade due to quid pro quo bribery of Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito, and because the three other justices were appointed by Trump and felt like they owed him a favor. So when Roe v. Wade was overturned, a lot of states started making very strict abortion bans, well beyond the standards of Western civilization, well beyond being civilized whatsoever. There are states in America right now that do not have any exception for abortion, and they would prefer a woman died to getting proper health care, to having any autonomy whatsoever. That is today's Republican Party. Here is a nifty map. You see this blue shaded state? Yeah, that's Minnesota. We don't have restrictions on abortions. Those were passed and placed into law because Matt Burke made this remark: abortions leads to women having careers. He made the worst possible comment at the worst possible time. People were already upset that Roe v. Wade was overturned, and then here comes this guy saying that women should be chained to their kitchens, barefoot, pregnant, just a slave for men to do whatever to, women should just do all of the housework while men have all the freedom to make all the decisions over the lives of men and women. It's gross, it's disgusting, and this did not help Mr. Jensen's campaign at all, and I am going to be referring to Scott Jensen as Mr. Jensen from now on, because Mr. Jensen questioned the efficacy of vaccines in general. Up here we have a DFL post about Mr. Jensen being a quack, which he is. And here is another page that shows his remarks. And you don't say shit like that in Minnesota. What people don't really understand about Minnesota is we have a healthcare weighed economy, a diversified economy that is weighed towards healthcare. This is the state with the Mayo Clinic. This is the state that does a lot of research. It has the U of M. So, to put doubts on vaccines and to tell people not to get them is a bad idea. Here's the DFL summary of some of his remarks. These are actual quotes with actual citations, because the DFL has the integrity to do that. the most populated parts of Minnesota got it, and even these rural parts are significantly more vaccinated than Missouri, the South, and the rural counties over and out in the West. That wasn't a good look. But then came the fun part. All the way back in January, Republicans were seeking to demonize trans people and make a culture war out of furries in the crosshairs. But there was no evidence of that, and people very much looked into it. I feel very sorry. Oh, it actually started in 2021, but yeah, I feel very sorry for the people who looked into it only to find that the only litter box in the school was in case there was a school shooting and the kids had to shelter in place and need a place to go. So, yeah. Jensen repeated that, and unlike Republican-dominated states, children are not political pawns. In Minnesota, you have parents who listen to their children and try to be helpful in a more mutually beneficial relationship. Children aren't just screaming things to be hit. They're not just people to sand all their confidence away. Confidence that they'll need later on in life. So the parents can feel good about their own shortcomings. No, this is a state where parents love their children and the school is very important and education is important. So when you have this saying lies about school, like if he's saying there are litter boxes in school, parents are going to ask their kids, is this a real thing? The kids are going to say no, and the parents are going to raise an eyebrow and go, what the hell? I believe that was enough to secure Governor Tim Walz's victory, to get voter turnout up. And I was an election worker in that election. I just did what I was told. I put the ballots together, the one ballot in the envelope. I told a lot of election workers that day that, oh yeah, the machines they're making conspiracy theories about, they're just scantrons. They work just like a scantron. You fill in the bubble, it counts it, just like a standardized test. It's a scantron, but for adults. And if anything ever does go wrong with an optical scan balloting machine, your paper trail is the ballot you marked. And this is one of the important reasons that we need to teach algebra, because if there are irregularities, if there's something out of pattern, if there's something in a precinct that looks way off, people will know like that. That's how elections really work in America. A wide conspiracy to rig the vote is nearly impossible unless you're projecting and want to rig the vote yourself and not use those machines. But even in the worst case scenarios of an election denialism and having election workers that are trying to guarantee a victory for their preferred candidate, Steve Kornacki will find out instantly if there are shenanigans going on. So will the CNN hosts. Like, the news moves too fast to rig and steal a United States election. 2020 truly was the most secure election in American history for that reason, and because of the widespread use of optical scan balloting machines. So let's go to the 2022 Minnesota gubernatorial election. And you'll notice the map looks a bit different from 2018. Let's go to that election too. So you'll notice that the places in Minnesota that you'd expect to light up blue lit up blue, and there were some counties in the South, these swing decision-making counties, and that was enough to push Tim Walz over the edge. Over here is where the Mayo Clinic is. That's where Rochester, Minnesota is. That's where a lot of health and technology work and industry is. But there's also a lot of that in the metro counties. Hennepin and Ramsey went DFL for governor by their biggest margins ever in 2022. So that cemented Walz's victory. And this map, these rural counties, Beltrami, which is where Bemidji is, which is where the Mississippi River begins. Whatever this one is, I believe my cousin lives there, my trans cousin, or maybe it's down here. One of these two, yeah, there were some rural areas that Walz won that he didn't on this map. But in the end, it didn't matter. Walz still won. He still swung enough suburban votes in Hennepin, especially West Hennepin, and these two stuck. Rochester stuck, and that was it. Walz won, and the DFL got a trifecta in the legislature, which I was not expecting that. I was not expecting that. I was expecting, best case scenario, Walz wins and another divided legislature, but that didn't happen. So instead, the DFL got its second trifecta in the 21st century. They seem on track to get their third, which would be their first consecutive trifecta since probably ever. Or since the 70s. And that defies political gravity. But the DFL has been doing that for quite some time. You had Mark Dayton winning in 2010 and then getting a Republican legislature. Then there was the 2012 trifecta, which increased the minimum wage and got some basic reforms and infrastructure money. And then Dayton kept going, and then 2018, more of the same, just this big, stable thing where not much changed, but enough did to keep the lights on and keep everything going. Keep in mind, the 2012 trifecta happened because Republicans shut down the state government, and everyone disliked that. Then that came to a head in 2022, and then the 93rd Minnesota legislature legalized the possession and use of recreational marijuana. The dispensaries are not out yet. Something a furry from Wisconsin I was rooming with, who I'm not going to name, just because I don't really do that on social media platforms that normies would be watching. I'm not going to do that, but she found out the hard way, oh yeah, the dispensaries are not out yet, and They're not likely to be out by 2025. They're trying to have as much competition as possible, make sure it is equitable, and that Black and Indigenous people will also be able to participate in a market that is dominated by white people in other states like Colorado, where the push to legalize marijuana started seeing some gains. And the taxes on the products that are available now, the seltzers, the gummies, which were legalized by accident before the 2022 election, right before the 2022 election, that all just, yeah, that happened because Scott Jensen couldn't keep his mouth shut about furries. So, to top this all off, here are the remarks.
Well, tonight some schools in Minnesota and some teachers are speaking out against recent comments made by Dr. Scott Jensen.
He repeated a false claim that some schools are allowing kids to use litter boxes instead of bathrooms because they identify as furry. Tonight, John Croman explains how educators are pushing back on that. John?
Well, the teachers and school board members who spoke at the Capitol today said it's a rumor that can be hurtful to children who identify as other genders. And they said that school districts have more important work to do than batting down debunked social media rumors.
Obviously.
There are no litter boxes in schools.
I even confirmed with my superintendent yesterday.
This didn't change people's minds. The
School board members and teachers from several districts are calling on GOP candidate Scott Jensen to apologize for a claim he made at a rally in Hutchinson.
What are we doing to our kids? Why are we telling elementary kids that they get to choose their gender this week? Why do we have litter boxes in some of the school districts so kids can pee in them because they identify as a furry?
Jensen was repeating an unfounded rumor of schools putting litter boxes in restrooms to accommodate children who identify as cats.
These conspiracies are insulting, and they undermine the real work that
that is not how gender dysphoria works either. You don't pick a gender a week. It's something that exists pretty much when you're born and then intensifies over time. And Republicans know this, but we have to start making them care, man.
we educators do every day.
It began at a Midland, Michigan school board meeting last year with a parent named Lisa Hansen.
Has in one of the unisex bathrooms, a litter box for the kids that identify as cats.
Hansen provided no proof, but it sparked a viral internet hoax that landed in the Minnesota House in an April floor debate.
They think they're a cat.
None of this has ever happened.
They put tails on, and they demand that they have a litter box in the school.
Mazeppa Republican
Furries
Steve Yaskowski could not say exactly where it was happening, and in the same debate, Minnesota Democrat Jim Dabney called for an apology.
For your using this platform to spew misinformation.
Dabney pointed out that just a month earlier, Nebraska State Senator Bruce Bosselman had apologized for promoting the litter box hoax in that state. In fact, there are reports across the nation of school districts being forced to debunk that rumor. For Jensen, the remark is part of a larger campaign theme that school children are being taught about gender orientation too early in life.
But when we do things like critical race theory or hypersexualize our kids with curricular questions or instructions that don't fit at the level of age that they're at, we're doing them no favors.
The Minnesota Department of Education told us today there are no...
If you're in Minnesota, this is all being done with great care. And if you're showing up to a school board meeting screaming about this stuff...
Schools in Minnesota with litter boxes
I know you're lying.
Now, we have made
and I'm calling you a liar right now because you don't care about the kids at all. You would throw your own kids under the bus to improve Trump's chances of winning the White House again. And as I had already stated, that's just not going to happen. I very much look forward to the reconstruction that follows the 2024 election. That will be fun. And you will, for once in your entire life, finally have a government that you fear and deserve it. And as always, subscribe if you like, and share if you care. Stay mad, Republicans.